Again, I'd like to introduce our summit chair. Anna's going to kick this next session off while we're waiting for Terry to get here. So, Anna, take it away.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me? Yeah? It's good. So, thank you so much, panel, for being here. We're having one more that was here and missing. She'll probably show up, so we'll make it spontaneous. Okay. So I have a great panel. We're kicking start always, if you've been on our summit for many, many years, we try to start with big picture and then we delve into more issues later. The theme of this panel is geopolitical issues and how it affects our region and specifically our country. I have great panelists. So I'll start here with, we're very proud to have our first Macedonian in the European Parliament as but representing Slovenia here. Irena Joveva. Let's give applause. Beautiful, talented, ambitious young lady. I cannot be more proud to have you here in the panel, so thank you. Then Mr. Marco Mantovanelli from the World Bank. He's the director of the Skopje's office and also covering Kosovo as well. Here's the star. Come on, Terry. I'm just starting to introduce. So a lovely lady, Terry Schultz, who works for the NPR and Deutsche Welle. My fellow compatriot from the US, but also a great knowledge covering of the European Union issues. We'll try to demystify a lot of discussions that are happening in the Macedonian domain that she will help us translate us here, what's happening in Brussels primarily. And then, of course, India Robel, who is the founder of Emerging Europe, a great think tank, newsmaker, story maker of what's happening in the Emerging Europe, which Macedonia technically is part of. So thank you, panel, for being here. I'll kickstart, I come from the US, and so I have very, kind of skewed perspectives to a certain degree, because in my world, the discussions that I'm part of is US or China. so Europe becomes less relevant in a lot of the geopolitics these days, and I'm like to debate that. And we as a country are even a small part of, if you will, Europe. So we as a country have had an ambition to join the European Union for a long time. I don't think I need to tell you that. I think we heard it from our politicians that that's really our goal. That's what we want to be of every prime minister, every president that has been, president of Macedonia, that has been the ambition. However, we did have a little hiccup. I think all of you are aware of our little hiccup earlier in the year. Apparently, France put a veto on what was pretty unified view that we should start our succession talks. So, Terry, I want to start with you, because I know you have strong opinions on this. Can you tell us what happened?
Okay, to start with, I don't have strong opinions, I have facts, and I want everybody to know that.
Good facts to grit your opinions.
It's true. Yeah. No, it's true. I don't have opinions. I have a long history with friends here in Northern Macedonia, and I have been here many times reporting, but I don't have opinions on this, and neither should most people. What happened in Brussels was that France didn't want to approve expansion to anybody. So you guys happen to be first in line, so it hits you. It doesn't make anybody feel good when somebody says, oh, it's not you, it's me. It's not you, it's us. I mean, it still feels the same way. It still feels like rejection. But I can tell you 100% that everybody else was prepared to let North Macedonia in, and the fury in Johannes Hahn, the Commissioner for Enlargement, in Federica Mogherini, in the Finnish presidency, on the day that it was clear that they were not going to be able to talk France into this, they were so angry. And they weren't angry at you. Everyone said North Macedonia has done what it should. North Macedonia has done everything we asked it to do to get to this point. And it was incomprehensible to the other EU members, to the EU officials who'd worked so hard on this, as well as to the North Macedonia population, why you had followed all the steps. Prespa was so painful. You've done it well, you've done it honorably, and that France said no. There are no conspiracy theories. When I heard from a friend here that there were articles coming out in the Macedonian press saying that they were trying to make you feel like you were not worthy and you had not done enough, that's bullshit, okay? Don't listen to it. Read respected media. Read mainstream media. Don't fall for the fake news, even when it's propagated in your own towns. Please don't. Read mainstream news media. And those of us writing in Brussels wrote the truth. It was not you. It was them. And I'm still sorry it happened. I feel terrible. I feel terrible for
So I
for
told
North
you we're going to
Macedonia.
have a very, spirited discussion here. So thank you
Wait
for
for
the great-
NATO, though. Everybody's so NATO in December is going to be a big party.
So we're going to talk about NATO later and how important it is. But maybe, Ms. Joeva, from your perspective, you're part of EU. True. So give us your perspective about the enlargement and discussions that are happening there.
I couldn't agree more with your facts. And I can also say it was them, it was France. It was not us. You have to know that the majority, as you said, the majority is really pro enlargement. And it was very hard for the rest of us to sit and watch, and we couldn't do anything, unfortunately. I'm in the same political group as Macron's party. And I'm trying my best. I'm one of the loudest persons, if I may say, in the group when there are talks about enlargement and North Macedonia and the rest of the Western Balkan states. But I have a feeling with them that, as you said, they don't care if it's North Macedonia or Albania or whatever. They just decided that it brings them some political points, I guess, in the country, and they decided they want to be in charge of this and that they will say no, whatever happens. So it's very hard to convince them, but I think that the main thing now is to stay, rational and to put the feelings aside. Of course, we are angry. I'm also, disappointed. Not only as a politician, but, as a, normal human being who knows how it is when you do everything that was asked from you and then you get nothing in exchange. So it's not the beginning yet, but it's also not the end. We have to know that it's not an apocalypse or the end of the world, so we have to have that in our minds and what's done is done, unfortunately. So we just have to look forward to the next month, and also North Macedonia should not give up, if I may say so, and just try doing its best, or even more, if it's possible, to show France and Macron, you were wrong. We are better. We are even more better now than we were before, and we deserve it even more than before. So we will try to do our best to change that, and I think that we will succeed in the end.
So I know that Andrew also covers this topic very closely because the organization that he's focused on is a think tank that really focuses on what is called emerging Europe. So roughly 20 plus countries that came from the Soviet bloc, former Yugoslavian countries that now are part of the European Union. Some of them, if not most of them, have been accepted. So what is your perception? A lot of the discussions, and I think how we as Macedonians felt, why is the rules changing? The world is not fair. What is your perspective of this?
So I think the first thing that I need to say that I've come from London. So in London, I would say, or in the UK, 90% of the debate is actually about Brexit. So it's nothing about North Macedonia joining the EU. It's only about Brexit. But I think what I would like to echo would be Günter Verheugen's words, and he said, I believe 2 years ago, when he joined one of our events, that we are in Europe. All the countries have the right to be in Europe. They have the right to be in the integrated part of the continent. There is no one who has any right to deny that right to them. So I think that in the situation that we are right now, we need to take into account 2 points. The waiting now might result in reforms being stopped or slowed down, but also there is another danger. We have, obviously, Russia and China looking at the region as well. So if, it might be a signal for them to see that, well, the EU is perhaps not really interested in the Western Balkans. So I think that the European Union should look at enlargement from that perspective primarily.
Now, you're bringing exactly the point where I was going to go next, so thank you for leading into the next question, which is NATO. So I agree with you that we are probably more vulnerable now, for different forces coming into our region, and particularly, obviously, our country, in terms of deterring us, if you will, from the path maybe that we were on. And we all obviously have interest not to necessarily go there. So how important is the NATO process to make sure that we stay on course? So Terry, you want to kickstart with that?
Sure. I actually spend a lot more time at NATO than I do at EU headquarters because I write for US media. It is really important that you stay the course, but not because of NATO. I'm often disappointed in how little NATO seems to impress on its members, and we can all think of some examples at the moment about human rights, economic reforms, those kind of things. I mean, they matter because you have to be a strong ally or you wouldn't get into NATO. But I think what's important for you to show now is not for NATO, but for yourselves. And I have trouble remembering this myself. It's not what happens to you, it's how you respond to what happens to you. And you cannot backslide. And I have heard that there seems to be sort of a bit of a lack of ambition now, feeling like, well, we did it all, and why continue? But you cannot, with your economic reforms, with your corruption reforms, with your rule of law, as Ambassador Burns pointed out, you need to be seen as a magnificent destination for business. And you know what? If that were true, then EU, let's be successful for us. And you cannot control what happens in Brussels. You cannot control, if it's not France, maybe another country will use this veto. Do not even think about that. Do it for you because you have the assets here. And when I hear from people working in economic management programs that since the rejection, there seems to be sort of I don't care as much anymore, do not let that happen. Don't do it for NATO. You're in. I mean, God, we presume that you're in. And that's important to protect you. But do not play this Russia card. Do not make allies think that maybe you're vulnerable, because you need to not be vulnerable for you. And we all know what happens. We've seen them play in elections. Montenegro has had a horrible experience. We know it's happened here. Be strong for you. Be reformed for you.
So, great. You're leading me into the next question, the panelists. So, how then should we think about this Balkan Union that has been presented to us? It's almost a consolation prize, if you will. And is it from an economic perspective, and it will be great to hear, obviously, for Mr. Montanelli, economic growth is stalling everywhere in the world. Trade tensions between China and U.S. are, it's basically the news effect is, Germany coming into recession pretty much this quarter. And we are already economically struggling. And how is that going to affect us? The economic union that's presented through this Balkan partnership certainly can be positive, but where I sensed and what is represented in the media is that, well, what if we just take this card, economically maybe short and near term, medium term might be good, is this it for us? So maybe you can comment on that, but I would like all panelists to comment on that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe after the opening from the other panelists, I should clarify I'm Italian and not French, just from the very beginning. But, okay. Having said that, no, indeed, jokes aside, indeed, I just came back from the annual meetings of the World Bank and the IMF, and I must say that even at parties where alcohol was flowing, the mood was now very uplifting. Yeah. And some of the issues discussed are the one we're discussing here. I think the big word was uncertainty, trade disputes, orderly exit, Brexit exits, some signs of stress in some country, even in the region, Turkey, for example, financial, etc. So the big word was uncertainty, and how is this depressing investment decision and other factors that fuel economies. I mean, we are seeing, you will have seen that the IMF and the World Bank have decreased their expectation for growth, but that happens. What is more worrisome is the assumptions on which we base that growth will resume going forward. And there are trade disputes will now become worse, or they will be solved. UK will find, and Europe will find an orderly way to handle that. Emerging economies like Macedonia will contribute more to growth than they did in past years, because the West and China are decreasing. So those are assumptions that carry some risks. So I don't want to be the party pooper, but there are some concerns about the future. So now, you alluded to the, well, I wouldn't call it union if I understand what is being discussed. But
that's the sort of, if you will,
yes,
the speculation.
What can country do, particularly small countries that will be in a way or the other affected by this? I think that thinking about, let me find the right word, not to be, facilitating trade and transport is a good idea. And in the Balkans, it will be always interpreted, oh, but it's Albanian tomatoes, Serbian ivar, and things like that. But in reality, it's less, no, I know, but I'm sorry. I know where ivar comes from. I want to step on a big minefield, but I read it in the paper, and those were the debate. The debate was between Albanian tomato and Serbian ivar. So, having said that, these are hidden costs that go beyond the trade disputes. You build a highway from Thessaloniki to the border, etc. You shave half an hour, and then trucks sit at the border forever. So finding ways to decrease this cost, facilitate trade, should benefit everyone. I'm leaving politics out. So there are other things that can happen, but this could be a concrete way to cope with a scenario that is not extremely positive.
Great. Terry, what's your view? How should we read into the, no, I think the proposal for more collaboration between our neighbor countries and ourselves?
I'm not as I don't know the intricate details of that, having been in Brussels, but I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing to increase your opportunity, because again, we need to look at how you improve your position regardless of what happens in the bigger picture, which you cannot control. I don't think it's a bad thing, but I think you need to play your politics carefully, and North Macedonia has a lot going on right now with elections coming up, and I think your politicians need to be very responsible about what they're doing and not be just thinking about re-election, but thinking about the long game. And as long as that happens, I mean, and people are careful and not playing into political dead ends or political traps. I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing. But again, I don't know the specifics on this as well as I would know what's happening in Brussels.
So Irena, from your perspective, I think the concern here is that's been presented to us as a waiting room. And is the waiting room going to be for us the permanent choice then? What is your view?
Just maybe first about the Balkan Union.
Yes,
I also don't like the word union, because it creates as itself like a place for conspiracy theories even more, because then you can say, oh, okay, we'll have our own union. That's not okay. But the cooperation is okay, and of course it's even better. But it should be like a one step ahead towards the European Union as itself, and not union,
on its own.
A different one, yeah. About the waiting room. I think North Macedonia waited enough. 15 years, it's like...
basically, it's a home. It's not a waiting room anymore.
European Union has its problems, of course, we all know. Macron didn't... It's not his idea that we need reforms. Of course we need reforms. But I think that the enlargement process and the reforms should go hand in hand, and they should not exclude one another. I think that what EU should do now should maybe communicate better with people here, so because European Union is involved here. I mean, we lost credibility here, but we didn't lose the political power, I think, yet for now. So we don't have, we cannot let that happen. So we have to communicate better so that people will know and feel that the Union, the European or Brussels or whatever is here still. And that, as I said before, it's not the end of the world. And I think that, France will not be able to go like forever with its arguments. So yeah.
So Andrew, I know you're eager to comment as well.
Yeah, I would like to say a couple of words about the regional union. So I think that I would strongly encourage more regional cooperation, but by regional I mean with countries that have already joined the European Union. For example, Poland, Hungary, Romania, because if you look at what is actually happening in this part of Europe, is that those two regions are sort of set apart. And I think even if you try to, if you're looking for flights from Poland, for instance, to North Macedonia, it's really difficult to fly directly. So I think I would encourage cooperation and collaboration on this in this field here.
Do you want to comment, please?
No, just to complement that, again, I don't think we should use the word union, but strictly from the economic point of view, it makes a lot of sense in the Western Balkans to break down these barriers to expand the market within the Western Balkans. There's space for intra-regional trade, unexploited. It is my hope, will also help create a more political conducive environment from the markets up. So in that sense, it's important. Of course, every time we present things as Union, former Yugoslavia, etc., there are knee-jerk reactions. I also represent Kosovo, and I know that the whole idea was rejected by many of the politicians there, because they perceive it more as a political initiative than as an economic initiative.
I want to shift course a little bit and talk about immigration. A lot of the discussions and the fear, and I think among the parents in the room, has been, well, for us, this stalling process of not becoming member, fully pledged member country of the European Union is going to make our children fly more out of the country. Which may be or may not be true, indeed. Certainly, I think I'm an immigrant. I left for a passion, to realize myself. And I would say that didn't necessarily leave because Macedonia is part of EU or anything else. I think we live in a global village. And from our perspective, we should be, and our youth should be considering themselves being part of that global village and realize themselves global on a global stage. So, but I know, Andrew, you've been writing a lot of these issues and observation of how immigration has, has happened, if you will, from the youth, not just of countries that are waiting for European Union entrance, but also the ones who are already there. Yeah.
Yeah. So over the last few months, we ran a survey among 10,000 students across 23 countries of our region. These students are aged between 19 and 24. And we asked them what are the biggest problems they notice in the region and in their own country. So the things that were actually got the biggest number of hits were corruption, number one by far. The second one was low economic growth. Also welfare, not really, the level that most of them would expect. And options that, and so that's a solution sort of. We later asked them, what they would like to do with their lives once they graduate. So a third actually wants to leave the country for good, their country for good. Two-thirds, roughly two-thirds, say that they want to explore their options, maybe come back, or maybe, perhaps stay where they are. So these results, unfortunately, are not really positive. And it's not only Macedonia, it's also, Poland, it's also Romania. I don't know if you are familiar with the Romanian statistics, but since Romania joined the European Union, about 40% of young people have left the country, which is a huge number.
It's quite a dramatic number, yeah.
So what we've been trying to look at as well is how governments are actually tackling that issue. And what we've noticed is that in most cases, governments have no idea why those people are actually leaving. So some of them are, like, let me give you an example from Poland. Recently, the government introduced zero tax for all people who are under 26 who are fully employed. So the funny thing here is that it's not for entrepreneurs, but it's only for people who are employed. So the idea here behind that was to attract, the migrants from the UK, for instance. But if you think about it, how many migrants in the UK are actually under 26? It doesn't make sense whatsoever. So, but also, you know, instead of actually thinking how to encourage, you know, entrepreneurial spirit, for example, they put the focus only on those who are fully employed, as opposed to actually attract those who have something.
Who want to create necessarily in the business.
So I think that what we should start with is definitely learn why the people want to leave, what the problems are, and only then come up with solutions. That is something that is
Marco, the World Bank did a study on this issue. You want to comment a little bit from your findings and how important it is to our country?
Very briefly, I agree with Andrew. It's not just salary differentials that drives people leaving. More importantly than that is the prospect of life on the medium term. Do I have education systems, health system, corrupt, meritocracy, etc.? It's the whole of it. It's not just salaries. Let's put that out. Second point I would like to make, immigration is not all bad. And countries, well, we have a room here of an example, diasporas, remittances, foreign direct investments, technology exchange. So let's not mark it only as a bad thing. There are advantages in that. The third, it's not just, governments should not just looking at blocking immigration, because it's a bit like, you know, sands in your hands. You cannot fully do it. You can up to a point. It's how to cope with it. And in the Western Balkans, how to cope with it goes through women. 50% of women are inactive. So you lose skills, bring your women to the labor markets and fill those skills.
Very interesting. Yay. Women power. Yes. Would you like to add, Ariana, more on this issue?
Yeah, maybe just, I mean, as you said, immigration is normal. We will never, like, you know, stop it. For the kids, it's fortunately, but for their parents, of course, it's maybe less fortunately, but it's normal. It's also happening in Slovenia. It's not like it's happening only in Western Balkan states. But the focus should be like from the governments how to convince those young people who go abroad to come back. That's the main thing, how to make the country more attractive to them, so they would wish to come back. I mean, it's nothing wrong if they go, but the best thing would be if they come back. So that's the main thing that the governments should do, I think.
Terry, any comments from you?
Just one comment. If corruption is the #1 concern, I actually find that really encouraging. Because everybody's admitting now that it's there and it's a huge problem. And if these governments are so puzzled about this, I mean, let's get serious about tackling corruption and not just have window dressing for this. That seems to me that would be a positive thing for the entire region. I don't think they should be confused about that. There needs to be some serious measures. And then maybe your young people will think they have a future that is not the family business of corruption.
Absolutely.
So just one comment at the end. The countries that young people want to go to right now, according to the survey, are Scandinavian countries. These are the top ones. The UK is now #2, then Germany, and France is like around 20% would indicate France.
So what are the key drivers that takes them there, you think?
Yeah, so I think it is quite interesting to see that Scandinavia is actually, maybe that's the model that they are looking at.
Fabulous.
And I think in the latest, you know, some of the research that's been out there, and broadly speaking, as part of the environmental issues that our country has been battling with, I think that is also noted as a key driver for many families, in addition to the corruption. And I think I just want to point that this is one of the key subjects of the summit this year, about let's make sure that we tackle the environmental issues, because we cannot ignore that a lot of the environmental issues can also be linked to corruption in the system as well.
Can I just say one more thing? That seems to me to be a huge opportunity for civil society to work on the grassroots level of corruption. Maybe the governments aren't willing to tackle it at the moment, or not doing it well enough. But if you have large organizations, and Macedonia 2025 can be one of those that helps, you need to help young people feel that something can be done. because sometimes even I as a journalist feel overwhelmed by how you would start to do these things, but it's you, it's people in this room who can help young people feel empowered and actually challenge the status quo that is not willing to give up their stranglehold.
So I think we identified the issues, at least on a broader scale, of what's happening, I think, in the region, broadly in Europe and globally, and also identifying some of the key issues like corruption, environmental issues, slow economic growth. I would like to spend the next 10 minutes maybe starting with comments actually what works. What kind of reforms have you seen that we can take as an example that can potentially help us and guide our government into the right direction? So anybody who wants to take the first question? Yeah, okay, great.
I can give you
Marco,
the
please.
nerdy World Bank and funny answer about it. I would say, particularly in crisis or turbulence like this, small economies, we would advise them to focus on the basics at this stage, both for two reasons. One, build resilience, so capacity to handle the storm if it comes, and to signal that you may be a different destination for investment and other things. Basics means macro and fiscal, create some fiscal buffers while the Western Balkans are still growing above the average in this. Unfortunately, it's mostly consumption-driven, not investment, etc. So build the basic, create some fiscal space and protect it. Strengthen the performance of your public spending, so quality.
Can you maybe, just for benefit of the non-nerdy
Yes.
banker types here, just to create that fiscal space, how can the fiscal space be created?
Well,
yep.
That's the hard part. But I'll make a generalization. Yep. The Western Balkans have one of the lowest revenue per GDP in the region, so there is a revenue agenda there. Yep. There is also an efficiency of spending agenda. There are some wasted money in the public sector. I'm talking about the public sector side. Yeah. So that's the way to build it. We are not discouraging, however, investment, because public spending in the Western Balkans is heavily on recurrent expenditure. Yep. It's underperforming on public investments. The region needs infrastructure, needs investment that bring back and in a situation where interest rates are quite low, you can do that without affecting too much your debt, right? Yeah. Because you're borrowing money. So that's one. The second basic maybe is more for the private sector. We noticed that in the Western Balkans in particular, managerial capabilities are not very sophisticated. And I wonder what collectively the private sector can do to strengthen. You need capable manager connected regionally and internationally if you want to engage. So, two messages out of the hat.
And I just want to emphasize that we as Macedonia 2025 are particularly focused, and our programs have been focused on building those leadership capabilities. As part of the Zafirovsky program, we've been training more than almost 40 senior executives in Macedonia, the top business school in the world, Kellogg School of Business. We have mid-level management trainings, the Schuller School of Business in Canada. So these are exactly where we're focused on, because you can be given the revenues, you can give given decent fiscal policies that can be, but if you don't have execution, force on the ground, that will be hard to execute. So I think it's a great point and very much aligned with our mission. Anything from you, closing remarks and guidance for us?
I will talk from the EU perspective. Yeah. There are a lot of talks now about the conference of the future of Europe that will emerge on some point in the Parliament or in the European Union. And I think that if we are talking about the future of Europe, that we should include Western Balkan states in the talks about that, because the Western Balkan states are the future of Europe. So I think the reforms, the Western Balkan states should be included in the reforms process of the European Union. So that's from my perspective, as a member of the European Parliament, I think that we should do that.
And I would like to point Lagarde, who is obviously former head of the IMF, now new European Central Bank governor. The same comments that Andrew made in terms of Marco made, that we should be investing in infrastructure, as a first speech as part of her ECB agenda, she actually pointed to Germany and to the fiscally tight countries, make sure you start spending. We need Europe to spend. We need to spend in productive projects and infrastructure. So the issues, what I'm trying to say here, the issues that we are battling in our own micro world of Macedonia and the region, etc., are something that the European continent is battling broadly, and similar solutions in line with what you said should be, and similar reforms should be taking place in parallel. Andrew.
Well, I would say the country should invest a little bit more in soft powers. We probably remember a few months ago, how many people searched for North Macedonia when a Macedonian singer joined the Eurovision. So I think things like that would definitely help,
a brand name, if you will.
Yeah, but speaking more seriously, I think I would look at countries like Lithuania and Estonia. So Estonia, everybody associates Estonia with technology. When it comes to, and that is a driver for Estonians to also come back to the country. When it comes to Lithuania, they've invested a lot in promoting the business services sector. So it's anything related to BPO and shared services. And a lot of foreign companies have come to invest in the country. They've developed a couple of sandboxes for fintech startups, for prop tech startups. So I think that this is a way going forward for Macedonia as well, where the talent is here.
Terry?
I would just urge everyone to not overlook nor underestimate the importance of, as you help develop these responsible managers, please work on responsible journalism, because no matter what, no matter how many reforms that you are seeding, S-E-E-D here, if you don't have a responsible free press here in North Macedonia, you are not amplifying your work. You are hurting everyone. I was here a few years ago doing a training for Macedonian and Kosovo journalists with former Ambassador Phil Rieker, and I was overwhelmed at how bad the situation was, how difficult it was to try to train working journalists in the mindset of a free press. And I just spoke with Ambassador Burns about it, and she said it's much better now that journalists are tackling corruption. But please think, when you're investing in projects, please think about working on journalism at the same time, because you can't move forward without it. And you won't even know when you're getting there unless people are writing about these things. I'm actually encouraged by the fact that she says they're writing about nothing but corruption. I mean, it's better than the converse of that. But please, work on journalism. I'm always happy to help. I talk to students all the time and empower them and encourage them to take this very difficult field. But please think about that when you're investing. I think it needs to go hand in hand, and you will see the payoff. Thanks.
So in summary, what we heard here is don't be discouraged, don't deter from our European Union and NATO ambitions. Let's make sure we continue on strong reforms that will happen in parallel with the European Union reforms. Spend in constructive projects that will benefit our GDP and growth. Invest in your managements, invest in the freedom of speech and power of press. So thank you very much. Great panel. Thank you.